I was 22 years old when I decided to spend the summer at my uncle's farm. My university semester had ended, and I needed a break from the chaos of the city and from people. My uncle, who lived alone after his wife passed away, had always invited me to visit, and I figured some fresh air and manual work wouldn't hurt. The farm was massive, surrounded by endless rows of cornfields and thick woods beyond. The house was old but sturdy, the kind that creaked when you walked and seemed to sigh in the wind. There was no Wi-Fi, barely any phone signal, and just one ancient radio for company. It was isolation in its purest form. At first, it felt refreshing. The first few days were peaceful. I'd wake up early, help my uncle feed the animals, tend to the crops, and return inside just before sunset. The sunsets were beautiful, blood orange skies stretching over golden fields. But even then, something about the silence after dark felt off. On the fourth night, I woke up to a faint tapping on my window. At first, I thought it was a branch or maybe a bird. But when I opened the curtain, there was nothing, just the field waving gently under the moonlight. I went back to bed. Then I heard it again. But this time, it sounded more like scratching. The next morning, I mentioned it to my uncle over breakfast. He paused, then simply said, "This land is old. You'll hear things." That wasn't reassuring. I wandered into the far corner of the field where the corn grew thicker and taller. I found an old scarecrow there, barely standing. Its head was a burlap sack with dark stains on it, and its arms were tied with rusted wire. I hadn't noticed it before, and I didn't like how it seemed to be facing the house. That night, it got worse. I was in bed when I started hearing whispers, faint at first, then clearer, and then unmistakably, my name. Jason. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The voice wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't even inside the house. It was coming from the fields. I looked out the window and saw movement. Someone or something was standing just at the edge of the corn, barely visible in the moonlight. A tall figure. I ran downstairs and woke my uncle, but when we stepped outside, no one was there. The next day, I asked him directly, "Has anything strange happened here before?" He stayed silent for a long time. Then he told me a story. 10 years ago, a hired worker named Eli had vanished. One morning, his boots were found at the edge of the field, but his body was never recovered. People said he ran off, but my uncle never believed it. After that, strange things began to happen. Crops rotting overnight, tools going missing, animals acting strange. The whispers started around that time too. He said he once saw someone standing in the field, someone who looked like Eli, but with eyes as black as coal. I tried to bless the land. Brought in a priest once. It only made things worse, he said. I didn't sleep that night. The next evening, while walking past the field at dusk, I saw the scarecrow again, but it had moved. It was facing a different direction, its arm raised slightly, like it was pointing toward the house. I was sure someone was messing with me. I took a flashlight and returned after dinner. The night was unusually still. Even the crickets were silent. As I got closer to the scarecrow, I noticed something buried beneath it, wooden boards like a hatch. Curiosity got the better of me. I pried it open and found a ladder leading into a dark cellar. My flashlight flickered, but I climbed down. What I found underground still haunts me. It wasn't a storage room, it was a shrine. The walls were covered in strange symbols carved into the dirt and wood. In the corner, there was a pile of old clothes with a rusted name tag, Eli. Then the whispers began again, louder this time all around me. "Jason, help me harvest. You'll stay with me forever." I turned to climb back up, but the hatch slammed shut above me. The light died. In the pitch darkness, I felt a hand grab my leg, icy cold and impossibly strong. I kicked, thrashed, and screamed, until suddenly the hatch flew open and light poured in. My uncle pulled me out. He'd been watching from the porch, worried I hadn't come back. We buried the entrance the next morning, poured concrete over it. I left the same day. To this day, I don't know what I encountered under that field. A spirit? A curse? Some kind of ancient evil? But every year around harvest time, I still have the same dream, standing alone in the cornfield and hearing my name whispered from the soil. If that first story gave you chills, now's the time to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and drop a comment telling us which moment creeped you out the most. And don't forget to share it with a friend, because the next stories are about to get even darker. I was 22 years old when I responded to a strange handwritten flyer pinned to a bulletin board at my college. It read, "Help wanted, strong hands for harvest, room and board included, 1 month work, good pay, no experience needed. Call Eli." There was no email, no website, just a phone number scribbled at the bottom. I was desperate for money that summer. My student loans had eaten up everything, and I couldn't go back to my cramped apartment without paying rent. So I called. Eli answered after just one ring. His voice was deep, slow, and gravely, like someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. He simply said, "Come before sunset. Don't be late." The farm was hours from town. I drove through endless fields of corn and wheat, the road turning from pavement to dirt as I got closer. The land looked untouched by time. No neighbors, no cars, just rows and rows of crops under a sky that felt too big and too empty. When I finally pulled up, Eli was already standing on the porch, tall, weathered, with a long coat even though it was nearly 90 degrees. His face was pale and leathery, eyes like dull marbles. "Right on time," he said. "That's good. Things notice when you're late." I assumed he was just being old and cryptic. He showed me to a small cabin near the edge of the property. It smelled faintly of soil and something rotten. "Stay inside after dark," he warned as he handed me the key, "and never go near the south silo, even during the day." That night, I tried to sleep, but the silence was oppressive. No crickets, no owls, just the sound of the wind dragging across the cornfields like something brushing its fingers through the stalks. And then, the whispers. At first, I thought it was my imagination, faint murmuring, like people talking just outside my window, just low enough that I couldn't understand the words. When I sat up, heart pounding, the voices stopped. The next few days, work was simple but exhausting. Hauling hay, checking fences, clearing brush. But the longer I stayed, the stranger things got. Animals wouldn't go near the south end of the field. Crows circled it constantly, but never landed. I saw deer standing still in the trees, just staring at the silo. Even the dogs barked and growled in its direction at night. Then on the seventh night, I saw them. From my cabin window, I noticed figures in the corn, at least a dozen, tall, impossibly thin, barely moving. Their skin was gray. Their arms hung wrong, like they didn't have bones. They stood motionless, facing the farmhouse. I blinked, and they were gone. When I told Eli the next morning, he didn't seem surprised. He just sighed and said, "Some things come back when the harvest is full. That's the deal." I had no idea what that meant. That evening, the air changed. It got colder. The sky turned a strange greenish gray, and the wind howled like it was angry. As I returned to the barn, I noticed deep claw marks on the walls, long gashes in the wood. Something had broken in, or out. I ran to the house. Eli sat at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee. "They're awake," he muttered. "You've been near the silo, haven't you?" I shook my head, but I had walked by it earlier that day, just once. Eli looked at me like a man watching a train wreck he couldn't stop. "Then they've seen you now. You opened the gate." "What gate?" "The one that separates the living from the forgotten." That night, I bolted my cabin shut, but it didn't help. At 3:13 a.m., something began scratching inside my walls. Slow, deliberate, like nails or claws. Then came the thump beneath the floorboards, rhythmic, heavy, like footsteps. I pulled back the rug and found a trapdoor I hadn't noticed before. Against every instinct, I opened it. A ladder led into darkness. The air that rose up smelled of rot, iron, and something ancient. I climbed down, flashlight flickering. At the bottom was a narrow dirt tunnel, barely wide enough for one person. Bones littered the ground. Animal, human, I couldn't tell. Strange runes had been scratched into the walls. And then I heard it. "We remember. We remember." A chorus of whispers echoing through the tunnel. They were behind me, beside me, inside me. The tunnel opened into a round chamber. In the middle stood a scarecrow, but not made of straw. Its arms were stitched flesh, its face a burlap sack with black pits for eyes, and it breathed. I swear to God, it was breathing. Then it moved. Its head snapped toward me. Its body creaked like old wood. And suddenly the whispers turned into screams. I ran, crawled back up, slammed the trapdoor shut, and pushed the dresser over it. At dawn, I went to Eli. He was already packing. "You saw it," he said. "Then it's awake now. It'll follow you." "I need to call someone. Police, anyone." "They won't come. They never do. They know this land." He handed me an envelope of cash and said, "Go. while it still lets you. I drove for hours, never looking back. But even now, in my apartment miles away, I hear the whispers when it gets quiet. Sometimes I find dirt on my bedroom floor. Once, I woke up with hay in my hair and a single black feather on my chest. I think it followed me. And the worst part, I keep dreaming of the harvest. I was 23 when I took a job renovating abandoned rural properties for a real estate investor. The pay wasn't great, but the work was consistent. And for someone drowning in student debt, that was enough. Most houses were simple: gut the moldy walls, rip up old carpets, maybe patch a roof. Then I got assigned to the farmhouse in Hollow Pines. It was a town no one really talked about anymore. It wasn't on most maps. The population was less than 200 and dropping. The directions I was given weren't much help either. Turn left after the dead tree, then follow the gravel road until you see the house that looks like it forgot what a neighbor is. I almost missed it. The house was hidden behind a curtain of trees and overgrown hedges. 2 stories tall, warped from time and rain, it leaned slightly to one side like it was exhausted. The wooden porch sagged. The barn behind it was falling in on itself. But what caught my attention was the hill behind the house, with a low, moss-covered doorway sealed with chains. A root cellar. That first day, I worked in silence, broken only by the sound of creaking floorboards and my own heavy boots. Inside, it smelled like mold, rot, and something slightly metallic, like old blood. I chalked it up to mildew. That's what I told myself. Upstairs, I found remnants of the family who once lived there. Baby shoes tucked in the closet, a locked drawer full of brittle letters, and a single photograph nailed to the wall. It showed a smiling family, mother, father, daughter, but their faces had been scratched out violently. By the 3rd day, the atmosphere began to change. The air in the house grew colder. My tools started to vanish, only to be found later in strange places. The freezer, the bathtub, even inside a sealed box. I laughed it off at first. Maybe I was just tired. Then came the sound. It was faint at first, like soft thudding from beneath the floor. I thought it was the old wood settling, but it became rhythmic, patterned, intentional. Knock, 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 always 3 times. Always just after 2 a.m. On the 4th night, I stayed later than usual. I wanted to prove to myself that it was just the house playing tricks. Around 10:30 p.m., while finishing up some drywall in the downstairs hallway, I dropped my utility knife. It slid beneath the baseboard, and when I pried the wood up to grab it, I found something else. A dark hollow beneath the floor. Curious, I pulled up more boards. That's when I saw it. A ladder, leading straight down into the earth. I hesitated. Every nerve in my body told me not to go, but something else, curiosity, pride, maybe something darker, pushed me forward. The tunnel below was narrow, damp, and reeked of wet soil and rust. The walls were reinforced with ancient beams, many rotting and chewed. I followed the tunnel, ducking low, until I came to an old wooden door. It had no handle, just a single word carved across its front: return. My flashlight flickered. From behind the door I heard something. Not voices, not whispers. Breathing. Slow, wet, shaky. I backed away, heart pounding. Then I heard movement behind me, like someone else was in the tunnel. I bolted, climbed up the ladder, slammed the floorboards back, and ran outside. I stood there in the cold night air, trying to convince myself it had all been in my head. But then I remembered the root cellar, the one behind the house. Something told me. It was connected. The next morning, I told the project manager I was quitting. He didn't even ask why. Instead, he said, "You didn't open the cellar, did you?" I shook my head. He smirked, almost sadly. "Good. That's the only reason you're still breathing." I moved back to my apartment in the city and tried to forget. But that house, it came back to me. In dreams. In flickering shadows. In the soft sound of knocking beneath my bed at night. I started waking up with soil under my fingernails. Once I found a sprout growing out of my bathroom drain. Another time, I coughed up a small pebble. Then one night, I woke to find my bedroom door open. Standing in the doorway was a tall, thin figure. Its skin was bark, its hair like vines, and its eyes were hollow black pits. It didn't move. It just said, "You found the door, but didn't return. Now we return for you." I blinked, and it was gone. But the soil kept appearing. My walls started to smell of moss and rot. Light bulbs flickered. Electronics died. Plants near my window wilted overnight. I went to a spiritual healer, a priest, even a medium. No one helped. Then I received a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single page. The cellar was sealed for a reason. You disturbed the soil. Now the soil wants balance. That night, I dreamed I was back in the tunnel. Only this time, I opened the door. Inside, the walls were covered in hands, dozens, maybe hundreds, growing from the dirt, reaching out. And in the center stood a figure with no face, only a mouth, stretched wide in a smile that never moved. I screamed myself awake. But I wasn't in my bed. I was outside, barefoot, standing on soil, freshly dug. I never went back to Hollow Pines, but something from Hollow Pines came back with me. And every night, the knocking begins again. Knock, knock, knock. Something below wants me to come home. I was 24 when I accepted a temporary position with the Regional Forestry Department. I had recently graduated with a degree in environmental science, but jobs were scarce. This one came through a friend of a friend, seasonal, underpaid, but with housing and solitude, which I actually preferred. My job was simple. Hike remote areas, flag diseased or dangerous trees, report invasive growth, and note wildlife activity. Nothing glamorous. I rotated through various districts, but then I was assigned to an area called Elders Reach. No one in the department said much about it. When I asked about the map boundaries, my supervisor just shrugged. It's state forest, not open to the public, probably hasn't been maintained in years. He paused. Just don't wander too far. Keep it quick. Day 1. I arrived at the old ranger station near Elders Reach, a small cabin with creaking floorboards, a rusting wood stove, and no cell reception. The previous ranger had left a short note. Maps outdated. Mark your own trails. Watch for fog. The trail to Elders Reach was barely a path, more like a gap between tree trunks. The deeper I went, the darker it became. Trees stood unusually close together, their twisted branches arching overhead like a tunnel. No birds, no bugs, just silence. That's when I saw it. A massive oak tree, old and gnarled, its trunk split open with a hollow large enough to crawl inside. Moss coated the bark. Surrounding it, the other trees seemed to lean away, as if avoiding it. Carved above the hollow entrance were the words, "Let sleep." I took a photo. Something about it felt ancient. Wrong. The dream that night back at the cabin, I had a dream. I was standing in front of the hollow tree again. Fog swirled around me. The forest was dead quiet. Then from within the tree, a voice spoke, childlike, gentle. "It's cold. Come inside." When I awoke, I was sweating, heart pounding. I chalked it up to stress, but my boots were damp with mud. Day 2, I returned to the same trail. I wanted to recheck my GPS and flag a few dead pines, but everything was different. My trail markers were gone. Chalk symbols I'd drawn on rocks had vanished. Even my footsteps from the previous day had been swallowed by soft earth. And then I heard it, laughter, echoing between the trees, faint, high-pitched like children playing just out of view. But there were no children, no people, no paths. I pushed through dense undergrowth, brushing past vines and thorns until I found the tree again. But now its bark was covered in handprints. Small, child-sized handprints pressed into the moss and bark, hundreds of them. The opening looked darker, and new words were carved beneath the old ones. "You're awake." I turned and walked away, fast. That evening, I locked every window and door, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the sense that something had followed me back from the woods. At 2:43 a.m., I woke up. The room was cold despite the fire. I sat up and saw them, footprints, tiny, muddy prints, leading from the front door to the side of my bed. And then, back out again. I checked the door, still locked, bolted. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At day 3, I reported what I could to the office via satellite radio. Static, then a voice. It wasn't my supervisor. It was a whisper. "You heard us." The radio cut out. That day, I didn't go far. I stayed near the clearing, avoiding the tree. But no matter where I went, the forest looped. Trees repeated, paths vanished. The shadows didn't fall naturally. At times, I swore they moved. Near sunset, I came upon a second hollow tree, identical to the first, but I had only seen one before, and now both had the same message carved into them: return. I stumbled back to the cabin just before nightfall. The visitor, that night, I heard knocking. Knock, 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 not on the door, from inside the walls. Then came the whisper, "It's warm in here, don't leave us out." I held my breath. I didn't move until morning. Day 4, the final visit. I packed my things. I planned to leave. But as I opened the cabin door, I saw something in the clearing. A figure, small, human-shaped, standing by the tree line. Its face was bark. Its arms hung like twisted roots. Its eyes were black holes. It didn't move. It didn't speak. I turned my head for a second. When I looked back, it was gone. I ran to my truck, heart thundering. The engine started, but the wheels spun uselessly in the soft dirt. Then I heard laughter coming from underneath the truck. I bolted into the woods, back toward the only place I knew, the hollow tree. When I reached the tree, it was open, not just hollow, open like a mouth. Inside, roots twisted like ribs. The soil was breathing. The air smelled of wet earth and rot and something ancient. I stepped closer. A voice rose from inside. Come in. Be with us. Warmth, rest, roots. I should have run. Instead, I leaned forward. 2 hands, child-sized, made of bark and dirt, reached and grabbed face. I screamed and fell backward. Everything went dark. Aftermath. I woke up 3 hours later, lying on the forest floor, cold and covered in leaves. My boots were gone, my clothes torn, but I was alive. Somehow, I made it back to the station. I resigned the next day. I've never gone near a forest again. But now, in the city, things are happening. My plants move when I'm not looking. My lights flicker at 2:43 a.m., and last night I found a tiny muddy handprint on my bedroom window. The hollow tree let me go, but I don't think it ever meant to set me free. I think it marked me, and one day soon, I will return.